Okay, so what I have on my screen here is the Moodle platform, which is a learning management system. It's like Blackboard and other systems, but Moodle has become so famous these days during the Corona pandemic. And I think we sent everybody who had registered to the class a username and password. If for any reason you did not receive the email or got buried in the spam or something, just send us on the WhatsApp group, either privately or on the privately better, because you are going to send your first and last name in case you don't want these to be revealed publicly. You can send it to either me or Brother Malik, who has been communicating with you. So we can update you with the proper username and password.
We also need one question. We also need the email as well, if possible.
Yeah, send the email in case we made a mistake in writing your email. So we, so you know, and once you are on the platform, by the way, you can edit your profile and change your password if you want to. So that's one way of doing that, and you can make your profile as presentable as possible. As you can see in the platform, this is called the view here. It's called the general. This is my general view, which has the discussion. Here I have created this platform or forum. This is for discussion. I can add a new discussion topic, or I can comment on current topic. Now, for all of you, dear brothers and sisters, just make sure your mic is muted unless we open up the platform for discussion and question and answer. Or if you want to ask question, you can just unmute yourself and talk. So I will have a placeholder for discussions, for announcements. If we have announcements in the class, like if we need to take some extra time or do some variations. I loaded the book here. I think this is the Arabic edition. I need the, oh, there is the English edition here. I have it. And I will be posting some other articles, external articles from outside. I have a syllabus for the class. I need you to look at. It's right here. So if I click on it, once you log into Moodle, and logging into Moodle again, we this is the link. I have put it on the WhatsApp group several times, and I think I can do it one more time. This is very simple. Once you log in, it will ask you to log with your name and password, the one that we created for you. So you can see the syllabus. And here I have the Zoom meeting, the links for Zoom meetings. We will update with each topic. Every time here, the link will give you the link for the new Zoom meeting. So tomorrow, if you want to log in during the class for the Sunday class, you can just come here and click for the Zoom. So we don't have to keep exchanging it on WhatsApp or Facebook. It will be always here. Now, the first topic. Now, let me go over the syllabus since we are here already. So that's what I use the platform for, because I can access all my material for the class. Okay, so let's see what we will be going through here. So in the syllabus, I made a course breakdown. There is the description, introduction to thinking. What is it about? It's an introductory course designed to introduce the concept of thinking, provide proper and accurate definition of thinking, what is thinking, and will distinguish between thinking process and the outcomes of thinking, of course, which are the knowledge. There is a reference book by Sheikh Taqiyuddin Nabhani, authored in 1973. There is a book which I am trying to find the PDF for. It's called Al-Fikr Al-Islami, Islamic Thought. But this is very general, actually. It's not dedicated to thinking. Probably I will skip this. And there is a book called Logic by Wilfred Hodges. This one, I thought I had the link for that, but I will get the link and put it up. Here is learning outcomes. I want you to go over that and see what we are going to learn, but for the sake of time, here are the topics which we'll be covering in this course, in this particular, I think, is it 5 weeks? I think it's 5 weeks course. Okay.
Yes, it should be 5 weeks.
Yeah, so it's about 10 lectures. So we have the introduction, which I will go over today. So let me mark this with blue, so I know that I will be talking about it. Then we'll talk about the next lecture. I will go about the components of thought, what is not thinking, and how we define thinking. We'll start going into the real meat here. We'll talk about thinking methods. What are the thinking methods? We'll talk about thinking in general versus what is called reasoning of the instincts. Sometimes our instinct can tell us something. Is this really thinking or something similar? So we'll talk about levels of thinking. We'll define 3 levels: the superficial, deep, and enlightened. Talk about some models of thought. What are the model in general? Once we understand what thinking is and what the methods of thinking are, then we'll develop together a model. And then we'll talk about fundamental thinking, or thinking about basis. That's the issue, and that's where we start. That's when we start talking about the using our methodology of thought for the Aqidah issue. How can we build the Aqidah with the proper definition of thinking, so we really know what is it that we are arriving at. And we'll talk about the difference between rational, imitation, and instinct response. And the last thing, we'll talk about the rational or based on rational. This is wrong. Or based. Is it like a rational thought or a thought built on rational thinking? It sounds tricky, but it will be a very useful distinction. So that's what we will be talking about. The next class will be on the forms of thinking, different forms of thinking, and with examples. And I will use 10 examples of thinking, and that's why we'll have the 10 lectures. Everyone will take a lecture. The last course will be on applied thinking, which is leading by thought, leadership. How we apply thinking to the leadership question. Okay, so this is basically our syllabus. And before I proceed, where is my? Okay. Before I proceed, I will see if anybody has a question before we go on the logistics, timing issues. By the way, I did not include in the syllabus, I should have, that we will be having some tests or multiple quizzes on this issue, because I really need to know if we are absorbing the material or something is missing. And then this will be used for the certification. So we will get certified with on the issue of thinking on this course or this class, if we pass all the tests with the with the required grade. So we have to pay attention to what we are talking about here, inshallah. Okay. Does anybody have any question here? Hello, are we still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes.
Sometimes if I don't hear something, I'm afraid that I lose my connection. Okay. So are we ready to dive in, or anybody wants to ask any question?
There are some.
By the way, you can ask the question in English, in Arabic, or in Russian. Those are the three languages I know. But if you ask a question in French, I will have to refer it to Brother Malik.
I think there was a question in the chat.
By the way, in the chat, I will not be able to browse through the chat's participants and others. So I'm in the chat here. We can hear you. That's fine. No, I don't see a question here.
I think it was is forms of thinking and applied thinking, leading by thought, part of this course.
No. These are the two different courses. Forms of thinking is another course. Applied thinking, leading by thought is a third course. So there are three courses. So we will go. The first one is the introduction to thinking. First, we have to understand what thinking is, so we can go to the forms of thinking. Okay.
I just wanted to just bring something up, because in case there was any technical difficulty still regarding the Moodle for anyone, please email the following email that was sent out to the WhatsApp, which is malikn.islamicoasis@gmail.com. For any technical difficulties, that way we don't stay behind going back and forth with us, and some of the staff members need to get to the center to open it up, inshallah.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Victor. All right. Let me proceed now. Now, as you could see here on topic number 1, I have this introduction to thinking. That's the very general. But the first lecture, which is lecture 1, I uploaded this today, this afternoon. This afternoon, my time, by the way. Your time, you are still morning. So, so this is, I can open it up here, from here, and I go here, and open it up so we can go through the material together. So this is my style. I will not be doing the this lesson in a halaqa format, for those who are familiar with what halaqa is in our culture, where we will just do all the explanation without the use of any paper or pencil. Here I will move to the instructor format, because this is rather a class than what I call it a session or a halaqa. Okay, so the name of this, the first lecture is Introduction to Thinking, an Islamic Perspective. Actually, this is the name of the whole course, but the that's what I have just gone through the syllabus. So that's my first slide. Usually I talk about that in my classes. The reference books will have Thinking by Sheikh Nabhani, the Islamic Thoughts, the Logic, and there is a book called Theory of Knowledge and Methods of Thinking by Brother Thair Salama. And again, this is in Arabic. I can post the PDF later once I get permission from the brother. This is, I talked about the learning outcomes, the outlines, I just talked about that. Okay, so let's dig deep here. And my introduction begins with these bullets. Number one, let me remind that man or human is a thinking creature. When we say it's a thinking creature, actually, this is this word is to distinguish this human that Allah Azza wa Jal created from all other entities, especially the entities on earth. That's what we are familiar with. We are not familiar in terms of the thinking facilities with the other creatures like Malaika and Jinn. So those are outside the scope of this now, at least for now. Later on, we can bring them in. But we know from the Quran that Allah Azza wa Jal showed that Adam has the ability to acquire knowledge, which is وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. So he was able to acquire this knowledge and to use it. And we have many hadiths and ayat that relate accountability to the reasoning, the ability to reason, or to have this facility, what we call it, the facility which allow us to think. Now, we still don't know what does thinking mean, but we know that it does exist. So we have even children, when they are, after they are born, they start to learn how to think and how to compare and how to do things. They don't know what thinking is. In fact, in my college where I teach, I'll find that more than 90% of the students, they don't know what thinking is, but they do think, of course. That's how they pass their exams. So they think. So the human is a thinking creature. So let's make no mistake about that. Now, some people sometimes they say, well, we have examples of animals that they do think, like smart animals, like rats, for example, or even dogs, the ones that can learn and eventually can avoid problems, birds. And each and every one of us may have some examples, or has, you know, National Geography, how sometimes they present other creatures or species that really can show amazing ways of learning, remembering, repeating things, avoiding things. But that, again, once we go deep in the topic, we will explain what are the actual activities of other creatures other than the human are, and those are not thinking, according to the definition that we will adopt and we will clarify. But nevertheless, whether a man is the only thinking creature or not, that's not the issue. But we know the man is a thinking creature, human. When I say a man, this is the English language, which is gender biased. Sometimes they call us the bias against women. Actually, they are the ones who are, even their language is biased. But so I would say human is, instead of man. I don't like to be in this category. A human, or insan, as in Arabic we would say it, insan. And by the way, I will be modifying my slides as I go, so don't worry about that, because once I finish, I will upload it back to Moodle, so I will have the fresh lecture on my site. Okay. So so this is number one, and we know that there is a vast amount of knowledge in the world, in our life. There is a vast amount of knowledge, a huge amount of knowledge. And this knowledge, there is no doubt that it's the product of thinking, which means without the thinking, when I say it's the product of thinking, I can, oops, where am I here? Okay, I do have the slide, that's fine. So all the knowledge of science, arts, geography, history, medicine, pharmaceutical industry, inventions, all of these are collection of knowledge, or the encyclopedia of knowledge, or the wealth of knowledge that we have. All of these are nothing but the product of thinking, which means that's what we said. The human is naturally a thinking being, naturally. You cannot prohibit the thinking facility in yourself. Let me be more clear or focused. Assuming that we go forward and we know that the brain is my main organ of thinking, I cannot block the thinking of my brain. Now, you can disable the brain through drugs, through alcohol, through some diseases, but naturally, when the human, let's say, I will say, I don't want to think about it. Even when you say, I don't want to think about it, it's a thought. When you say, I don't want to think about it, it's a thought. And when an idea comes to your brain and you dismiss it, which means somebody brings you some news and you don't like to hear about it. So I'm not going to think about it. Actually, this is a product of thought. When you say, I'm not going to think about it, because you hear the statement, you responded to the statement, and you responded to the statement based on the knowledge, the information that just arrived at your brain. So all knowledge that we have, whether it's trivial knowledge or very deep knowledge, it's the product of thinking. Now later on, I will distinguish between the product of thinking or the product of the instinct response, which is my instinctual response. That is not knowledge. That's not knowledge. That's a reaction. To react to something, let's say if you get, let's say if you have your hand on some, let's say if this is a cup here in my hand, assume it's hot. Once I touch it, and if it's very hot, I remove my hand. That's a response. And this response is not knowledge. You can record the response, so which means you can record it that I had my hand removed off a hot glass immediately as I touched it. I can record that. So I record it as piece of information, which is the reaction to an instinct. So, and that's part of the issues which we'll be talking about. Now, over the past, let's say thousands or millions of years, doesn't matter how many humans live, most of the time, people are not interested in how do we think. We are interested in the product of thinking. So the product of thinking, let me mark this with a different color. So the product of thinking is what we care about. When you go to college and you start studying, let's say, anatomy and medicine, and the instructor brings, let's say, the various parts of the body and how they are structured and how they are linked together in a very beautiful manner, you are not interested then in how did the brain arrive at these conclusions which are finally in front of you. You really want to understand what's going on. That's all you care about, which is the product of thinking. So the knowledge now becomes the focus, or the focus of attention, rather than the method on how this was produced and or the facility which produced it, which is, we call it the mind, the human mind that produced that, the mental process. Let me call it the mind, or what we call it in Arabic, al-aql, in English, mind. So those are the terms, which is, now thinking is a process. Pay attention to this. Thinking is a process. Mind is the engine that processes information to produce thought. and knowledge is the product of thinking. So that's the model which I will show in a second to explain this more clearly. Now, because of this, because we have been as people in large in the world, in the West, in the East, in the North, and the South, we are obsessed and overwhelmed with the product of thinking, which are the knowledge base that we have, which is very beneficial in itself. In fact, that's why it was produced. So we paid little attention to the process which produced this knowledge and to the mechanism that was used to process this this thinking machine. So that's why we can, I will stress here, we as people in the last thousands of years, we have failed really to understand the reality of thinking, and let me add, and the nature and the reality of the mind itself. We really did not understand that. Many people did not. And I will show that even our top Muslim scholars in the past, philosopher scholars, they really hand waved on the issue, but never went deep into the issue to find exactly what this issue of thinking is about. And so they arrived at different styles. They just found how this thinking process goes on, like the logic, which was the main focus of the Greek philosophers. They invented logic and they used it a lot, and they produced a very large or vast wealth of philosophies. The Greek philosophers and later on people have translated their work and built on it, like the Muslim scholars in the 3rd and 4th century of the Islamic existence, Islamic culture and civilization. They translated the Greek philosophies, they adopted logic, and they used logic quite a bit. Then later, during the Industrial Revolution, or just right before the Industrial Revolution, the scientific method, or even sometimes I call it style, sometimes it acts as a method or as simply a style of thinking. So we learned that, and we composed thousands of books on scientific methods, scientific research, scientific analysis, etc., which produced the science of chemistry, biology, physics, and so on. And as I said, it produced a wealth of knowledge. But we remained here most of the time at the styles of thinking. We did not go into the accurate understanding of the reality of thinking. What is this process? How does really the mind or the brain functions in order to become like the origin, what we call the mind? So here, fail to distinguish between even thinking and the mind. The mind itself, and then thinking is the process. Keep thinking, and let me write it even so we don't. Thinking is the process, thinking process, and the mind itself, which is the engine that makes the process, which is, here is a model which I really want to come to. So we have three things. We have knowledge, which is very, so we have the knowledge here, and this is the products of everything that we know, our books, our arts, our music, our geography, as I said, basic sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, civil engineering, electrical, all of this is knowledge. In the regular flow, the natural flow, the mind usually is the one that's the organ or the mechanism behind all of this. The mind makes the thinking process. It has a methodology to do thinking process. Now, whether you know how the mind function or not, it's irrelevant, but it does function. It processes information. It interacts with all types of realities, objects. It interacts with in the lab. It interacts in information given to you by in a book format or a piece of news. It applies a certain method. It's called method of thinking. Now, later I will show that the mind here has different functions or different processes. One of them is the thinking, and it has the, let me add here some, make it like this. This is information that gets stored here. This is, we call it storage or storing. In our daily life, we call it memorization. But in computer technology and modern technology, we call it storing. So we store data or we store knowledge in the brain somewhere here, not the brain, but within this mind issue. So there is a storage, and then there is the retrieval of information. So in the brain itself here, let me put it this way. So this is a process where these are the brains which it can do. So this is called retrieval. Instead of memorization, remembering, we call it. In our human life, we say remembering. In information technology, we call it retrieval. We retrieve information. So that's what these facilities. But those retrieving information or storing information is not really the method of thinking. The method of thinking is something else. It may rely on these issues, and we will show that it does rely, but it uses a facility in the brain which allows this brain to generate the thought, so that we will do the thinking, and from the thinking we do knowledge. That's the normal, that's what happens in reality. In our pursuit of understanding the thinking and mind, people have always started from knowledge, because we look at knowledge, and they go back and to see how this knowledge is processed. What do you do in order to produce the knowledge? So they remained very much confined to this part, which is the method of thinking, which is partially explored. Now, you will not be able to know what method of thinking is there unless you know what the mind is, which generates the method of thinking. It's exactly like the engine which generates energy, the car energy. What does the car engine do? Car engine, all it does is to convert an energy from one form into another form, from electric or fuel, heat, or maybe nuclear energy, converted into mechanical energy. The mechanical energy now moves the wheels or the parts which makes the wheels move, and then everything else becomes accessories. But the main thing that's responsible for the motion of a vehicle is an engine. What's that engine? Quite often, you may not know even the engine. All you know is, I add gas to my car, and once I add the gas to my car, it moves. If it runs out of gas, it stops. So that's what the method of running the car is, to have the kinetic or mechanical energy that allows the car to move. And the knowledge here is the motion of your car from at certain speeds, slow speed, high speed, push the brakes, etc. This is the knowledge about the motion of the car itself. And here the method of transferring, there is a transfer of energy, there is an energy, not the transfer, it's the energy that is generated by the engine. And the engine here, only few people know what that engine is. And even sometimes after the ones who invented those, they probably have passed away and they left behind them some footprints. So you can just start imitating or repeating that. So you don't produce new thoughts or new forms of engine. And that's exactly what we have here. We have a mind which is buried somewhere in our bodies. Some people today, they call it the heart. Some people continue to claim or insist it's the brain. Even today, some people, they say there is a thinking facility almost in every part of the body, which is very awkward or strange. But nevertheless, I'm not going into that right now because that's still beyond me to explain at this moment. It could be more clear by the time we finish this lecture. So this is the model of knowledge creation. I call it knowledge for short. So there is a mind, there is a method of thinking, there is a knowledge. If we want this cycle or this whole flow to be absolutely absorbed and understood, and we know it, we do this process, and we can repeat it every time we need to do that. Now, the reason I say repeat, some of you who are in engineering or computer technology or even in any type of business, when you have some fault or error and you really want somebody to fix it, first the question that comes, can you repeat this? Can you do it again? Can you show me how it occurred so I can fix it? Now, what he's actually asking you, he's asking you about this model. Can you go through so you know where the error or the bug originated, what originated that, and how it manifested itself in the system, and then how it showed up as a fault or as an error or as a catastrophe. So he's talking about this. Now, without really knowing the model, many people, we keep asking about it without even knowing what it is. So the bottom line here, what I wanted to say, as you will probably be surprised in a second, you say, wow, for all this history since Adam alayhi salam until today, people even with the great knowledge and the great observation facility have not been able to come with a very solid, proper definition of what the mind is and how the mind functions in order to produce thought, and then the thought becomes a wealth of knowledge. That's unbelievable. But we'll say, oh, don't be surprised, because naturally, as I said, when somebody presents you a book, before you start even looking at who published the book and how it has been published and what's the publishing methodology and what type of reviews it went through and what is the process or the mechanism that allows this book to come up into the open, first you look at the knowledge, you look at whether it's valuable or not. If it's valuable, probably you will be obsessed with its values and start expanding on it or using it, or you don't like the value, you just throw it and ignore it. And at some point, someone of us, very few, who will go and see, okay, let me see how this guy really was able to produce a book. I have my doubts. Or you start analyzing things and you remain confined most of the time at best here into this area, because you are not very keen or interested on this one. And if you get interested there, or some of us get interested, you may be diluted by some ideas, by some previous thoughts, by some biases. So you get you don't arrive at the absolute correct understanding of this mind. Okay, so that's basically what had happened in the last centuries. So now in order to understand our model, we have to start with the mind rather than start with the knowledge. I know what the knowledge is. I have been using my knowledge for the last so many years. I can think without even knowing what the method of thinking, because I can produce a knowledge. You give me an exam, I look at the questions, I go to the references, I can do things, and then I can come up with the right answer. You tell me there is an event, I can look at the event. I have some previous knowledge on the issue, do some mental work, then I come up with a conclusion. Could be correct or could be false, but I can come up. Alaikum salam.
Can I ask a question now, or?
Sure. Let me. Yeah. Why don't you ask question now before I proceed? Go ahead.
Yeah. Just to help follow the model a little bit better, would it be possible to give just a very simple example of the model in practice, or even like the wrong path that you highlighted?
Actually, the next slides will be about giving examples, but I don't mind showing one right now. Let me duplicate the slide, and I will use, for example, part of the knowledge, which is, let me take some political issue. I would say Biden wants to contain Russia. Okay, so this is a piece of knowledge which I read in the papers, and I start looking about that, and the how somebody used that. They looked, check recent history, recent remarks by Putin and Biden. Read, let's say, some article in the Associated Press. So I got these pieces of information. I looked at them, I compared them with previous events, came to the adding to the knowledge here. That's knowledge. I'm adding to the knowledge this statement. So this is a statement. It's a thought. It's a product. Now it could be right, could be wrong. Like Biden wants to contain Russia. It could be something else. Biden and Putin want to become allies. That's another idea. One of them could be, if one is correct, the other one is false. So depending on how the information is processed, and this is all is the process which is done by the mind. The question here, what is the mind that produced that? What exactly happened in the background, what we call it back end? What had happened in order to be able to check this history, recent remarks, and some article here? How did this allow me to arrive at this conclusion? How does this thing function here? That's the type of example we are saying, the model. Now, what the people are interested in mostly is whether this conclusion is valid or invalid based on what has been said here. I don't care, or many people did not care, what is it that was able, what is this issue called mind that was able to process this information, to do this processing and come up with a conclusion that remained vague. That's what that remained vague. Now, because it remains vague, quite often I will not be able to verify the accuracy of the knowledge based on this method here, because I don't know how it has been processed. So it becomes very difficult to analyze. And that's why, if I give one more example, what we call them the controversies, or take for example the evolution. Evolution process, which is the Darwinism. If you read some articles by people who are pro-evolution, you will find so many ideas that support this, like this, many ideas. It's okay. So these are pro. And you can read it through, and the more you read, the more you become convinced. Now, on the other side, if you see the theory of absolute creation, and the reason I'm saying absolute creation, which is creation from nothing, vis-a-vis the Big Bang, here you will find lots of pieces of information that supports that, and you can process this information. And because you are using one of the styles or methods that had been created over time, use the methods here, let's call them of logic, basically, and sometimes science. Okay, and those, if you use those, you will be able to, at some point of time, to accept both ideas or reject both ideas, or accept one or reject one, which means all the possibilities. Now, why this is the case? This is the case because the facility that produces all of these, which is the mind, because mind actually is the one that worked with the science and these pieces of information to come up with the idea of the absolute creation. And the same mind is at work to using the science or logic to verify or accept evolution. But because we don't know this mind, we don't know what it is, we may not be able to come to a final conclusion of what the exact reality is. And that's the mystery. So the mystery, it's just like if there is someone who, let's say, if you are making, let's say, a piece of art, you are drawing something, and you keep drawing, and then you get tired, you go to sleep, and then somewhere at night somebody comes and scratches your piece and leaves. You never see the guy. So you make all types of assumptions. You don't know what is happening for sure. That entity which is responsible for the damage, or that entity which is responsible for this thought here. So this is this entity is responsible for this thought as much as it is responsible for that thought. But if I don't know what it is, then I become all these. That's why, if I may jump to conclusions, when the Western European nations, they arrived at the conclusion of the separation of church and state, simply they were not able to arrive at certain facts. So they said, okay, let's have it somewhere in the middle. Let's accept both solutions, both church is valid and the human authority is valid. So let's make them work together. So let's not exhaust our mental facilities because we don't know that mental facilities, what it is in order to arrive at the conclusion. At best, we use, let's say we use this logic at best. We use the styles that have been arrived at. People did arrive at styles like the logic. They did arrive at some scientific notations. They said, okay, let's do some science here. So that's how the confusion comes about. And this becomes much more clear when we go next time and start talking what this mind is. So once this is understood, you say, ah, okay, so now I know if I am really thinking or I'm just imagining, if I'm thinking or I'm reacting to some previous information, if I'm doing thinking or I'm just sorting out information from my memory, or I'm just playing with the same pieces of data, rearranging them, and then come up with a new view of my thought, rather than thinking. So once I know what the mind is, I know what the thinking, how the thinking can be done, like in this example here. I know what thinking is and the method of thinking. Then I know if the knowledge created is valid or invalid. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Sheikh, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So, Sheikh, in one of the slides you have mentioned the mind.
Speak closer to the mic, please.
Okay. Okay. So, Sheikh, in this slide.
No, still not hearing you.
Okay. Sheikh, in the slide that is in front of us right now, you have mentioned that the human mind is.
Is it only me or everybody is not hearing well?
No, I can't hear.
I can't hear it as well.
You can't. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's with your mic.
Let me go a bit louder. So I was saying in this slide in front of us, you have mentioned the human mind is unexplored.
I can't hear anything, Brother Saeed.
Right.
If you can write it to the chat, write your question. Somebody can read it for me. Can you do that?
Yes, I'm doing that.
Yeah, please write it down. And if Brother Malik there, you can read it for me, I'll appreciate it. Okay, until the question comes, here I will start with my model, starting from top down, which is that's the approach we will do. We'll take top down, which is start from the mind, what it is, and then what's the method of thinking here, and then eventually how knowledge is created. And sometimes it's good to know what is not rather than what is. So sometimes you may ask the question, what is the brain? What's the mind? I would say, what is not the mind? What is generosity? Or what's not generosity? Sometimes you can define something once you know it's the counter or what's not. So now, I say mind is not the brain. The brain is a tool, but it's not the mind. It's a tool. It's an organ in the body, just like the hand, the heart, the liver. It's a tool. Now it does have functions, but by itself, I cannot say that my brain is my mind. The brain is a tool which can be part of the mind or used by the mind. And it's also it's not the feeling. because feeling is emotion, actually it's and it's a response to instinct. And this is very important because you'll find that many of the scholars, prominent scholars, like Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, like Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya, like al-Shatibi, they refer to the mind as an instinct or a power of an instinct. It's not an instinct because the feeling, it's a feeling. Now the feeling can be correct, can be incorrect, and there is no way to verify the validity or invalidity of the feeling. You may feel angry when you are not supposed to be angry. Probably you should have been happy because what has just happened to you can be your best of options in the current being. So feeling is, it can be correct, can be incorrect, can be valid, can be invalid, can be justified, can be not justified. And so instinct is not the mind. Now it can be part of the mental process. Somehow it can be used in the mental process, but it's not the mind. It's something else. It's not either a revelation, the revelation by God, al-wahy. Mind is not al-wahy. Al-wahy reveals to prophets and messengers certain issues, thoughts, ideas, instructions by Allah Azza wa Jal, but that is not the mind. It can be, this revelation can be stored in the brain because the brain is a storage as well, but that's not the mind. So these are issues here. Did anybody see what the brother Saeed had written? Let me see if I can.
Can I read it for you? Can I read it for you?
Yeah. Why don't you read it, please?
Yeah. As you had mentioned, the human mind has never been explored, but in recent psychological studies, they made remarks about left side of brain and right side of brain, and how different chemicals are released when people behave in various conditions. So, isn't that count among the endeavor to understand the reality of human mind?
Well, that's exactly what I had just was referring here about the brain. This is the brain. The brain, and it can be composed into different sections. Section responsible for certain enzymes or hormones, or they call it neurons. This is the physiological function of the brain. Now, we even understand more than that because we understand the mental operation of the brain. So especially with the logic. Now the logic is one style of producing thoughts at much higher level than the what goes inside. Because what goes inside the brain, that's the physiology and the technical work of the brain, but that's not mind. That's not the mind. That's part of the facility. That's one of the tools. As I said, it's a tool. Now, how does this tool function? Today we know with the neurons that are emitted by the brain. Once you want to, let's say, memorize a piece of Quran, I start memorizing. I'm reading so that I can keep fresh in my memory. The brain emits certain types of neurons that allow certain cells to open up and to make sure that the data, the voice that comes in, is generated into certain biological form to be imprinted on the cell. This is technical. That's technical how the brain functions, but that's not the mind. That's not the mind. The mind is more than just the brain. Although this is the brain is necessary part, of the mind. It's one of the components, as we will see. But all of these issues about the brain, whether some of these are valid, some are invalid, depending. Let's say today, this is the theory about the neurons and which part is responsible for which. Tomorrow this may change, but it doesn't violate or does not dismiss the idea of how the mind functions as a mind, not as a brain. But it's a good observation, of course, here. Am I correct to say that when mind reacts to instincts, it's still reacting to reality, or its natural process as humans? It is a natural process. It is a process of the instinct, but that's not thinking. It's not thinking. This is sometimes it's called the built-in reaction to certain activities. And although the reaction to instincts can be stored in the memory of the brain, and later on can be used or can be retrieved. You can just recall. Let's say you touch something hot and it burns your hand. Next time you see it, you will not touch it because you recall from your brain that last time you touched this piece of object, it hurts you, it gives you pain. So that's a recollection or remembering an incident. But the thought is something else. The production of thought is something else. And the mental process is something else. Therefore, the mind is something else. It's not the mind. Now, going back here, so we are saying that, look, brain is a tool. We accept that. It's true. But that's not the mind, because you may have a brain, it's not damaged, and you are not thinking. You are not producing thoughts. And we know many people, you will give them some ideas, some information, they keep repeating the information time and time again, will never be able to produce or never produce a new thought or a new piece of knowledge although they have a valid brain. Or maybe the brain is damaged. So even if the brain is damaged, you will not be able to produce a thought. So because it's necessary part for the mind, but it's not the mind. So the brain itself is not. Also, we know that animals have brains, but we recognize that animals do not think. They can respond to events, but they cannot produce thoughts. Similarly, for the instinct. Instinct is a different definition. We will go into that at some point. The difference between, in fact, it's in my syllabus, I believe. Let me see if I have. Yeah, thinking versus reasoning, and I called it the reasoning of the instincts. In fact, being too aggressive here, calling it reasoning of the instincts. Many people would not even accept this term. They will call it just the response to of the instincts. But I will say, because in our culture we say al-tamyiz al-gharizi. Tamyiz means the ability to distinguish between things based on instinct. Okay. In general, most of the previous definitions of mind until today, they were either vague, and we'll show some examples, or unfounded, simply without evidence. I'm just saying that. That's my opinion. Or irrelevant. They are not relevant to the method of thinking or to the production of thought. The most serious attempt of mind definition, actually to define what mind is, were two philosophers, actually Marx and Hegel. Hegel is, and both are Germans, by the way. Hegel and Marx. Hegel lived before Marx, maybe about 100 years before Marx. Yeah, I think so. I think it's about 100 years between them. And both, they really went deep trying to understand this facility of mind in a very solid manner. But nevertheless, and I will show what really went wrong in their discussions here. Now, of course, some people will argue with us, will say, well, brother, our Muslim scholars really did understand the mind and the thinking process, and that's why they produced a vast amount of knowledge, like the fiqh, tashri', political systems, economy in Islam, the ideologies of Islam, etc. They produced millions of productions. Yes, we say true, they did, but when they came to trying to define what mind is, they were, at best, they were vague, at worst, they were absolutely irrelevant. So let's say the main three themes Muslim scholars talked about the mind, they called it an instinct. Actually, it's not a response to instinct. They call it's an instinct. It's something that's instilled in us, the mind. And one of the scholars defined it as one of the instinct's capabilities. It's a capability of the instinct, which enabled the understanding of context and realities. It's true, it does allow us to understand context, and it's one of the capabilities. What is this capability? So our question, always, we started with this question: what is this capability? So which they did not answer. What is this capability? Although, and they say it's within the instinct, okay. Whether it's within the instinct or whether within another organ of the body, we need to know this power that allows you to do the understand the context of things. Some other scholars, they came to the definition saying that it's the understanding of things. Now, this understanding is actually, it's the result. Oops. Is the result of thinking. It's not even the method of thinking. It's the result of thinking, the understanding. We still need to know how does understanding happen and what is responsible for the understanding, which is the mind. So the question here remains unsolved. And the third category, they said it's a vision. It's a vision, something that comes within your body. You are able to see things which you could not see them before. It's a power, and then it's a power to prevent a human from evil actions. So this vision, it degenerates into a power that makes you stay away from bad actions. And they derive this from the linguistic meaning of aql. So aql, which is mind here, let's say here, derived from linguistic meaning of aql. In Arabic, aql in Arabic means tying. It's like when you tie a camel so it doesn't run away, or when you show some wisdom. Sometimes you say this person is, in Arabic, aqil. Aqil means he's wise. Antonium we call majnoon, or insane. So they use this linguistic term to say, oh, so it's a power. So this aqil, or this brain, this mind, it's a power within the human that allows you to distinguish between what is right, what is wrong, and to keep you from doing what is wrong. So that's what mind is. So this is trying to adapt the linguistic meaning to the terminology meaning, which is definitely is invalid approach. The whole approach is wrong. And according to this definition, the acts of good, it's if you are doing something good, this is not mind, because the mind does not have to prevent you from doing evil, because it's not evil. Mind is the one that stops you from running away after your desires. Mind is the one that stops you from going and killing someone or beating someone or hurting someone. Okay, so these are the evil words. So they said the vision is this ability of the within the human that allows you, that prevents you from doing whatever evil is there, and then all the good or the khair things, they are naturally part of your instinct. Part of your instinct is to do something good. So if you are tempted to do something bad, then the mind comes in and prevents you. But the question remains, what is it that prevents me? Okay, assume that I will say, okay, I agree with you. That's a power to prevent you from doing some evil. True. If I have a mind and my mind is functioning good and I'm processing everything is in the right form, it will prevent me from hurting someone or stealing money or any of these evil things. But what is it that prevents me from, that forces me to stay away from the bad things? So still did not answer what is mind. They're just say it's that's how it manifests itself. That's how it shows. One of the best, one of the first scholars in Islam that ever approached this issue of the mind, his name is Al-Harith Al-Muhtasibi. If you want to sometimes look at this guy, and he has a book called The Mind. Actually, that's how we say Al-Aql, the mind. It's reality and variations of understanding. The reality of the aql, of the mind, and why the people differ, have differences about it. So the title is excellent, it's great. But then he comes to the conclusion that it's an instinct. This mind, which he's trying to define in his book, it's an instinct which is installed by Allah to test his servants. So again, it's an instinct. Now the instinct itself, those instincts themselves are not organs, because the instinct, it's when we say the instinct of survival in the human body, if you do the anatomy of the human, whether he is alive or after death, you will not be able to identify a certain piece called instinct. So the instinct itself needs a definition as much as the mind needs a definition. So again, it's a vague issue which will not help. So this is what Al-Muhtasibi said, it's an instinct. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, he supported Al-Muhtasibi. He lived almost Al-Muhtasibi, yes. So he supported Al-Muhtasibi's theory that it's an instinct. And he said, mind is instinct which can be enhanced by knowledge and wisdom. That's what Imam Ahmad had mentioned. It's an instinct. What is it exactly? What are its components? What is it made of? He did not mention, but he said, look, this is an instinct which you can always enhance by more knowledge and wisdom, which is true. This is true. The mind can be enhanced by knowledge and by wisdom, which means the more information you have, the better your mind can function. The more wisdom you have, the more your mind can correlate information to realities in a proper manner. So this part can be enhanced. I will color this with green, and this one, instinct, I will color it with red, because this is not a definition. So you are going back to square one. Al-Juwayni is called Imam al-Haramain. Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, this is the Imam of both Haram in Medina and Mecca. He supports al-Muhtasibi again, and he says it's an instinct, and he adds to it a way to arrive at knowledge using primitives. This is logic. So al-Juwayni was impressed or maybe affected by the logic, which was already translated from the Greek philosophers. And so he said, this is it's a way. Note that he's defining the mind as a process. It's a way. It's a way to arrive at knowledge using primitives. The primitives, these are the bases upon which. Now somebody is asking question. Let me take the question. Again, brother, if you want to ask question, please, brother or sister, I'm sorry, you can just open your mic and talk, so, or at least stop me. Are you saying, actually, when you say, are you saying that mind is naturally good and wants to do good? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just referring to some of the definitions of the Muslim scholars in the past, what they were looking at mind as. Okay, so which is, we concluded this is not even a definition. So so for instance, if a child is raised from birth without the knowledge of right and wrong and was only taught bad things, the mind would still want to do the right thing. According to their definition, probably this conclusion could be true. That's why we said, look, this is not even a valid definition, and they use that based on the linguistic definition of the word in Arabic, aqala, which means tied. You tie something so that it doesn't allow you, like when you tie, let's say, a cat, so it doesn't run away and spoil all things around, or a horse or something. So, but that's, I already mentioned, this is all of these attempts to define, which failed to define what mind is. They just made some observations, and through these observations, they made some conclusions. But that's invalid definition. Okay. Do I have other questions? Yeah, so that's the question from, I think, Sister Tabitha William. No, again, the point is, I'm not saying that. I'm just now narrating what people like, let's say, Al-Muhtasibi said it's an instinct, which is incorrect. It's not an instinct. He did not make a definition. Imam Ahmed supported this, and he said it is an instinct, but it can be enhanced. We said, yes, the mind can be enhanced by knowledge and wisdom, but it's not an instinct. Instinct, there are 3 well-defined instincts for the human, and they can be proven. They are manifested in the survival, in the instinct of kind, and the religiousness. And those even have to be, you must know what mind is and thinking process to be able to define what instinct is. Otherwise, we will not be able to define. So Al-Juwayni, he again supports the same idea of the instinct, adding that the issue of logic as a process. There is another scholar called Qudama bin Ja'far. He said mind has 2 variations. One is natural, which is something that's given by birth for everyone, and one is earned or structured, which you gain over time. and of course, without any reference. Why? What is natural? What's the what's accepted? And he gave some examples, which are, again, they are subject for discussion, and focus on the result of thinking, not on the nature of mind. In his way of definitions, he said, he did the results. What he looked at things which were contributed to the knowledge of people, and based on that he came to the conclusion that knowledge is, or the mind is, there are two types. But what is it? Now, even if I would just go, okay, Brother Qudama, mashallah, you are a good scholar. What is the natural mind? Give me the definition of the mind when it's natural. Give me the definition of the mind when it's earned. What is it? I don't see any there, and if you look at the literature, you'll find definitions. Eventually, he goes back to the instinct. There is Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, considered one of the top philosophers in Islam. He classified mind into 4 categories or 4 views. One of them, again, is that it's an instinct based on what Al-Muhtasibi has said. And then another said, he said it's a born knowledge, just like the Qudama bin Ja'far said. It's a born, something born with you, which is another type of mind. A third type is a knowledge obtained through experience, which is the earned one, again, like Qudama bin Ja'far. The fourth part, it's a power developed and enhanced by instinct experiences. So it's going back to the instinct. So again, no clear definition or something that you can rely on. So can we say that only what is observed by senses produces thought and not reaction? No, we can't say that yet. See, at least I cannot say that yet. I have not said it. I will wait and see how we will approach this issue. Until now, what I'm saying is, look, until recently, attempts to define mind, to define what mind is, which is the one. Let me go here. What is the mind that makes thinking, that thinks? What is it that thinks? So we are all thinking beings. I started with that. We are all thinking beings. Humans are thinking beings. This is how Allah Azza wa Jalla created us. But what is it that does the thinking? I know what is it in my body that digests the food. It's my stomach. What is it that stores information in me? I know it's my brain. The brain is the storage. That's why, in fact, somebody who said about the portions of the brain, that's why dementia happens. That's why Alzheimer happens. If the mind gets damaged partially, part of the information that was stored on the brain, I'm sorry, I said not the mind, the brain. If the brain gets damaged, part of it loses some cells. And if it happens that those cells that you lost in an accident or an event, they are the ones that were used to store the best story in your life. You will forget it. It will go. So we know what the brain does. We know what the liver does. We know the stomach does. And these are organs. But we don't know what is the one that's making the thinking. What is it that the one that makes thinking alone and produces thoughts and knowledge? That's the issue here. And that's what these answers that they gave us about the instinct, like by Al-Muhtasibi, by Imam Ahmed, by Al-Ghazali, by Ibn al-Jawzi, where he said mind can be recognized by its outcome only. In fact, this was the latest question by Brother Muhammad Shirazi. He said, look, forget about what the mind is. He said, Give me the outcome. I tell you what the mind behind it. As if he's saying for each and every outcome, there is a mind. But what is it that's behind? I think Al-Jawzi in this way came very close to a definition, because he made the mind variable, dynamic, not constant. It's not a constant thing that's always there. It's not a brain, which is always there. It's not an information which is always there. It says it is recognized by its outcome. What is the outcome? Now I am talking. Give me a challenging question. I produce a thought on the spot. So the thought I just produced, there is a mind behind it. But still, Brother Ibn al-Jawzi, you did not tell me what is it that's behind my current thought. Now let's say brother may ask me a question. He says, look, the other day the Russians, they fired some rockets at a British airplane or aircraft carrier in the Black Sea. What do you think was behind that? I say, this must be a warning against Britain, because Russia is already in some agreement with the United States. I said, wow, you just arrived at a thought. It could be ridiculous, it could be wrong, but I just arrived at a thought, an outcome. What Ibn al-Jawzi is saying, behind this, there is a mind. The mind is the one that generated that. Excellent, but what is it? He did not tell me. See, and I am using now, when I am making these statements, I am using the mental process based on a very solid understanding of mind that I have. So I know exactly how I arrived at this, and I know what is it that allowed me to arrive at this conclusion, whether it's right or wrong. But this definition here, still I need to know what is it. He said mind can be recognized. He said, in fact, it's not, he doesn't say mind is what stands behind an outcome. He says it can be recognized and may not be recognized. So I may know what was behind this idea, and I may not know. There is another guy or alim scholar, I'm sorry, I have to be watchful here. Al-Nasfi, he says it's a power of self, power of the soul, power of our nafs, which perceives external knowledge. So there is a power within me. What is that power? So it's because for the lack of understanding or knowledge, he just said it's a power within our nafs. Allah Azza wa Jal gave us a certain power. What is it? I don't know, or he doesn't know, which perceives external knowledge. So there is external knowledge. Now, what perceives the external knowledge? Let's say, what's external knowledge? I give you a certain book now. Let's say if I open anything here, let me go back to my Google, and actually, I will go to my Excel. What is my Excel sheet? Here's an Excel sheet that I have. And here I'm making some comparisons between different issues. This has nothing to do with our topic. This is something I'm working on. This is knowledge. I can explain it to you. Probably one of you or two who have some knowledge about computers and financial technologies and programming, I can explain it, and he will be able to perceive it. Okay, he was able to perceive a knowledge which I probably can spend 1 hour and I can explain. Okay, so this is a power of the self which perceives external knowledge. Now, some of you would be able to perceive the knowledge which I have just displayed. It's an Excel sheet with some information. Some will not. So now why you have the power and the other guy doesn't have the power? Where do you get this power? What is it that allow you to have the power and the other person does not have the power? Okay, so that's and also he says it's a nucleus A nucleus, that's my best translation of the word Jawhar. Somebody can give me a better translation than my translation, I will appreciate it. So he says it's the Jawhar. Jawhar, it's like a diamond. It's like a jewelry, actually. It's the jewel. Oops. I can't even. Okay. So the An-Nasfi says it's a jawhar, it's a nucleus, it's a jewel within us, which enable us to perceive again the unseen, al-ghayb. So he wanted to show, okay, here it's a power of self that allow me to perceive external knowledge. So this is knowledge that exists in the real world. But then he says, what about al-ghayb? Malaika, jinn, al-yawm al-akhir, the day of judgment, the attributes of God, Allah Azza wa Jal. These are ghayb for me. Previous history about previous prophets, what happens after death. All of this is ghayb. Says, oh, the mind, he says, it is that nucleus, it's that jewel within you that allow you to understand al-ghayb, the unseen, which is again, is not even a definition, it's not even close. It is something that he thought it would help. Abu Bakr al-Razi, another philosopher of Islam, he says it's a tool which distinguishes between humans from animals. Okay, we understand this is true, absolutely true, but what is the tool? What is that tool? So it's a tool, it's a facility. I have been using the word facility. So he did not help me in understanding what's mine. So, okay, so let me summarize what our Muslim scholars, until recently, until the last 100 years, there no real definitions really of mind. They did not help us in this issue. They helped us in the production of mind, which is knowledge, Allah. They provided opinions without evidence, which is strange, because when it comes to fiqh and sharia, they would not generate any hukum without evidence. But when it came to fundamental ideas and thoughts, they were happy to go without an evidence. Okay, brothers who are in control, how much time do we still have?
The time is up actually right now.
Really?
Yeah, so you're over by like 10 minutes, Sheikh.
And you have been silent, man.
It's because I had to drive to Oasis.
Oh, okay. Somebody has to remind us, otherwise the brothers and sisters may get tired without me knowing. I will finish this slide and keep the next lecture. Okay. So to summarize, as I said, no real definition, no evidence, equate mind with products of thinking quite often. Methods and means of arriving at knowledge, they talked about those methods. The attributes and power of thinking, they talked about the power of thinking, its attributes, what enhances it, like wisdom and knowledge. But the conclusion, I would say they have failed to provide a proper definition of what mind is. And that's the, and that probably is, because somebody may ask the question, why is, how could it be so? Well, the Muslim scholars, mostly they were involved and engaged with the ahkam, with deriving rules and laws from the Quran and the Sunnah. And the ones who were, who gave some attention to the philosophical issues, they were not the prominent ones. These are not the major ones. This is not Like even Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, he just made a comment on what Al-Muhtasibi said. He did not even elaborate a lot. So the main scholars, they were really busy deriving rules. They were busy distinguishing the correct hadith from the incorrect ones. They were doing all these types of things. So that's why I like the definition by Saeed Khan, the treasure. Jawhar is the treasure. I may use it. I will test it against some of the definitions. Okay, so this is the conclusions. Then my next lectures, I thought I would have been able to finish these. I will talk about next time about the theory of mind by Hegel and Marx. These are the fathers of, one is the father of capitalism and democracy, and the other is the father of socialism and Marxism. They gave some definitions, very interesting definitions, but nevertheless they were will show that these are not the valid ones. And that's what I will be talking about next time, and then we'll start talking about our own definition. Would it be fair to say that when the issue of whether the Quran is created or word of Allah was due to not understanding the mind? Yes, that's a good example, and I was saving this example when we start talking about some examples and applications of the thought to show how al-qada wal-qadar, the whole thing was messed up because of because of not understanding what the mind is, and they applied logic rather than the mental process. And if you don't know what the mind is, then you might use any of its methods or styles without knowing whether this is applicable or not applicable. And this also will apply it to the use of scientific information for the proof of the Aqidah. Why some issues were there. Can human mind depend 100% on their mind only? Okay, brother, I will ask you, I will answer this question in a manner that's consistent with this class. I will only be able to answer this question if I understand what mind is. If I understand what mind is, then I will be able to answer this question. Until now, I don't know what mind is. As per my class, of course, I am assuming that I am a student of this class as well. So you have to bear with me. And question, is there any difference between an information, a statement, and a thought? Yes, there is a difference. And we will talk about that when we come to the model of thinking, understanding, and knowledge. So we will the distinction between thought, concepts, and information. We'll talk about that in details, inshallah. Now, can somebody explain to me why all the questions are in silence? I need more interaction because because we are recording this, so it will come up in the recording. Otherwise, I will be sometimes answering a question without telling what the exact question is. But anyways, for today, this is fine. For tomorrow, we'll try something else. Now, again, for all the brothers who are here, this information, these slides are posted, and I will update them to the Moodle class. So in Moodle, on Zoom, we will be talking live. On Moodle, you will see the lecture, and you will see the video which we have just recorded, which I will upload tonight, inshallah, to the site, and you will find out that in the video you will be asked to answer some questions in order to proceed in the video. You will not be able to proceed in viewing the video without answering certain questions. I just want to make sure that we are going through the material. This is not for if you want to check the recording one more time. So you need to go through the whole stuff, inshallah. I may be able to break it into sub videos to make life easier for you, but that's my procedure here. Okay, any other questions? Any other
one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So after the video is uploaded with the interactive questions and you can't proceed on the video until you're done, do we have to finish the videos in order? Let's say, for example, I missed this lecture and the next lecture, and I go online, I want to finish the videos. Do I have to first watch video 1 before I'm able to look at video 2?
Yes, this is very important because things are sequential. They depend on each other. Yeah, so I will make this as a requirement to be able to open a next video or next lecture, especially offline. If you are it's not live, not synchronous, you need to go through the whole thing. Yes. That's why I will put some questions there. So you will, and the questions will be trivial, just like in the summary definitions here. I'll say what is the main conclusions of Muslim scholars. I will put 2 or 3 of these, and you will just have to mark them. And the PowerPoint is available without any restriction. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
So question.
Go ahead, brother.
So for tomorrow's class, is there anything that we need to prepare? Do we have to watch this once online or not yet?
No, I will do it because there is not much time between the 2 classes. I will make it what I've just said between let's say both lectures, Saturday and Sunday, and then the next week. Within the week, you need to do something, but not. I realize from now until tomorrow morning, it's not easy. It's not even enough time for me to do my homework itself. Okay.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Abu Talha. Just a question before you go.
Yeah, brother.
Sheikh, is there, so let's say if the discussion amongst the Sahaba, let's say in Darul Arqam, would it be fair to say that they understood this? This is why the later questions that were produced amongst Umayyad or Abbasid were not there, because they actually understood the definitions?
Yeah, I think they understood the main method of thinking, which is the rational one, because when the Quran used only this method, and they did not go away from the Quran, not a single bit. So naturally, they were not impacted by any other method of thinking. They were not impacted by logic. They were not impacted by any partial reasoning. The only reasoning type was the rational reasoning, which is absolutely based on the proper definition of the mind. Now, they may not have, let's say, as we will show, a certain definition of what mind is, but they did apply the proper method of thinking because it was outlined in the Quran in a very clear manner. Whereas during the philosophers' era, they tried to arrive at conclusions what they call it independently without being biased. And they loved the fact that they arrived at conclusions similar to what Islam has come up with, but what they skipped, what they did not know they were missing the rational method of thinking, which is the proper method of thinking based on a valid understanding of mind. So that's what exactly we can say about those Sahaba at the very beginning. That's why it was not a problem for them, al-qada wal-qadar, or the creation of the Quran, or the creation of the acts of the humans. It was not an issue at all for them. And if you read Imam Ali, the way he used to go through the process of thought, you will find that this person must have known exactly how mind functions without missing any component.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, Brother Shirazi, thank you very much for all the brothers here. And I know there is a big brain behind all of this issue, which is Brother Shirazi. Jazakallah khair. So we have to admit that. Okay, if there are no more questions, I can log out. And here is Maghrib time. Anyway, I have to stop for Maghrib. Maghrib in my time. I know it's not even Dhuhr in your area, but it's Maghrib here. Okay, brothers. We are all done. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I will quit.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Waalaikum
Jazakallah. Jazakallah
assalam.
khair.
Alaikum assalam.
Jazakallah khair.